Thank you so much, Jairus. I admit I am horrified by the idea of a slide with 4 charts on it. That makes me sad, very sad. Jairus is not only a speaker, he, as I mentioned before, he helps plan our Chicago Skeptics events. I will note that if you're looking for somebody who is helping to organize Chicago Skepticamp, if you need to talk to one of us who have a question, on our name tags you'll see a blue dot. All of the speakers have green dots, or they should. If you're a speaker or an organizer and you don't have a dot on your name tag, go see Abby. So yeah, that's going on. If you do have any questions, obviously you can ask me, any of the nice people back behind the counter over there, anybody with a dot. Now that all of our tables are here, I want to let you guys know that This is Milwaukee has come all the way down to Milwaukee. How long did it take you guys to get here?
Hour and a half.
Nice! They brought a whole crew. Brian is going to be speaking today for us. He's going to give a talk this afternoon, and I'm hoping it's going to be fantastic. Go and check out what they have to say. Phil is still here and handing out information on his fantastic business over there, Polaris Financial Advising. And over at the bar there, in a quite traditional role for him, Tom Britton is selling... I love you too. Is selling tickets for the seance, which is the after show. Everybody here, because you are here, get half off of tickets for the seance, and they are $16 for us, so $16 for you, usually $32. Go over there, and he can take credit cards, I believe, yes. Credit cards, cash, we don't deal in camels or sheep, however. They're very difficult to transport, so please know, oh, he's saying maybe, he's saying maybe. All right, so maybe if you happen to bring a sheep with you, you can trade that in. Our next speaker, I'm actually very interested in. This is probably the topic on our list that I know, one of the topics on our list that I know the least about. Francis Lawrence is talking about Bid on Truth, the things that drive and derail our thinking, about cognitive research and the errors that we kind of tell ourselves. And he's hoping to use his research to reform primary school education, which I think is a fine and noble goal. Because I know very little about this topic, I'm just going to let him go ahead and roll with it. So, Francis.
I feel like I should greet you, but just give me like 2 more seconds. Okay. Hi, everybody. Yes, so thank you. So I'm Francis, and the research that you referred to is research that I want to lead in the future on cognitive biases, etc. So today I'm going to present a model. I'm really nervous about a model, like a framework of how to think about things. Okay, and I'm real nervous about how it's going to go because Marcus, the first time I presented the model to him, said it was stupid. And then the next time, he said, hey, you should present on that at Skepticamp. So I don't know if it's a dinner for schmucks thing or what, but I hope it goes okay. It actually relates a lot to what Jairus had been saying about data-driven thinking. But yeah, okay, so first of all, I want to acknowledge, I want to thank, well, I have a scroll here. My sister gave me the idea of, in order to make it look like parchment, to use a lighter, you know that trick? I think I got impatient though, because it doesn't look like parchment, especially the part that's missing. And then I'd also like to thank her for going to the shelter with me and finding this dog. They're both going to be parts of the model. Okay. So skepticism, right, comes from the Greek skeptikos, for inquiry, investigation. And we've been knowing that we are prejudiced a prejudiced species for thousands of years. You know, it's been noted as early as the Greeks. Pyrrho is one of my favorite philosophers, one of my favorite Greek philosophers, and he said we can't know anything, absolutely. We're going to feel like we do, but we can't. So what he would do, they would joke that if he approached a cliff, that he would just say, I don't really know that it's there, and he would walk off and die. That isn't how he died, though. But he would acquiesce to the appearances. He would say, it looks like it's a cliff, so I'm going to treat it like one. So the things that drive us to certainty, that's a component of what I would like to speak about. But isn't it strange that even though we've known that we are prejudiced thinkers for so long, we still have people who, they know it in their soul that this is true, right? You ask 1,000 people whether people are rational, and you'll find that everybody's rational, except for everybody else. So, why is it that we believe that we know truth, but that other people, they're just making silly errors? In fact, I've got two guests here. I have a few guests, very supportive network. So there's been a lot of research about flashbulb memories. And that's what's involved, for instance, with you remember what you were doing, where you were 9/11. So for a couple hundred years they've been studying this. I know there was a study that was done after Lincoln's assassination. But it wasn't until about 40, maybe even 20 years ago that they started to think, was it 2015? No, 30 years ago at least, they started to think, wait, what if we don't remember, even though we remember very vividly, what if we don't remember as accurately as we think we do? So I mentioned this research to Ariel, I'm just going to point her out. And, but I didn't describe the study, but she said, oh, I know where I was. I know what I was doing. And I thought that was funny because, you know, I was just saying that even though we remember very vividly, it's not necessarily accurate. So she tells me the story, and I'm thinking, you know, everybody has that story. So then I tell my dad here. I tell my dad here that story, and the punchline is, and then she said, oh, but I remember, right? That's supposed to be funny because, again, I just mentioned that there's research saying that you don't remember as accurately as you think you did. But he's not laughing. He's sitting there silently. I'm driving, and he goes, okay, but I know where I was. I know what I was doing. So again, why is it that we think that everybody else is making errors when we aren't? So the Kahneman came up with, if he wasn't the originator, he at least was a big proponent of it. Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman describes System 1 and System 2. System 2 being your slow but lazy thinking self. And then System 1 being like a shotgun reactor that responds to questions, sometimes not even the question you think it is, and offers up something, some kind of truth to System 2, and then System 2 usually just accepts it. So I borrowed the terminology from Freud, ego and id, and so my model is composed of ego, bid, and sid. Okay, so Sid is this scroll here. This is just your list of preferences. The trick didn't work for me. This is just your list of preferences, and I don't actually know whether we're going to get to it. But the idea is that ego is that thinking self that you think comes up with your beliefs. It doesn't really. It just accepts whatever bid offers. And so the trick is, when your intuition is offering something, and that's another word for bid, or System 1, that you try to match, you see whether the behavior that it's suggesting or the decision it's recommending matches what your personal preferences are. So that'll probably be the end of that for now. But it's bid, ego, and sid. So let's say that you are considering candidates for an election, right? You look at the candidate's face and you have a reaction. And you watch the ads, etc. And then when you are asked why you are voting for that person, you come up with all sorts of justifications, all sorts of reasons, right? But why did you originally want to vote for that candidate? And what motivated you to come up with those reasons? Because you can come up with reasons to justify just about any candidate, right? I mean, Ben Carson might be difficult, but pretty much any candidate you can justify. There was a study done at Princeton in 2005. I believe I bet you're right. That they had subjects look at two faces, and there were two candidates from some senatorial or gubernatorial race with which they were not familiar, which the subjects are not familiar, right? So they're just looking at two faces, okay? And they're just given a moment, they glimpse at the faces, and they choose which face looks more competent. I just want one person to give me a percentage of how often, don't go too high though, because then if the actual percentage is lower, I'll be embarrassed. But give me just an idea of how often you think they picked the candidate that ended up winning the race. So they look at the two images, they get a glimpse, they say that face is more competent. How often they pick the person that actually won the race? 60%, okay. 75% of the time. 75% in one study, 82% in another study. So you look at the face, and all of a sudden, Bid just starts going crazy. Alright, vote for this guy. Vote for this guy. And then you say, okay, yeah, it's a good war record, it's a good family, whatever other bullshit, right? So that is attributed to Bid evolved. In case I run out of time, let me say the value of this model, I think, is to let people know that we are not the single entities that we believe ourselves to be. In other words, we are not just a single reasonable soul that processes information really well and arrives at truths. Instead, we've got something else that we evolved with that is offering things up to us. Kahneman called it System 1, and I characterize it as a dog, Bid. Now, the advantage of the competent faces, I think two things are at play. One, typically the leader of our tribe would be the best hunter. And typically the strongest, fastest hunter had the highest testosterone levels. And typically you can see testosterone levels in the face, with the chin and the nose and the strength of the jaw, etc. So we evolved to start to see, the guy who's tall, handsome, I'm not tall, but I'm handsome, and I have decently testosterone-ness features. So we start to look to him as the leader. Now there's also another component, which is it's kind of the opposite, when we look for trustworthiness according to how close together the eyes are, etc. Little tricks that we evolved with. Little tricks that Bid reacts to. And then ego comes in, and there's confirmation bias, and there's hindsight bias, and there's all kinds of different biases and intuitive devices we use in order to support whatever Bid came up with. But the trouble with the model is that you may feel like, because the voices aren't any different, what ego comes up with, which is very little, and what Bid comes up with, they're very similar voices, which is why everybody else thinks, you're making error because of intuition, but it feels true to us. Am I right? I mean, you have an opinion about a candidate, and it's difficult to tell what was based on fact and what was just, you felt that it was true. So that is one of the troubles with the model, but I'm hoping that it can be used, just like System 1 and System 2, to communicate to others our fallibility. Now, I'm not infallible, okay? Because, when I feel like something is real, it is real, right? I know certain things. I know things that are true. But you people, my concern with you people is that your intuition is just, overriding all your thinking, that it is all your thinking. So again, that's kind of the trouble with the model, that we might realize there's no way to distinguish between the voices. So then the trick, the rubber cement didn't work either. The trick is to see, okay, so I'm crossing I'm evaluating two candidates. I feel very strongly about this candidate. How much of that is based on a trick that I use that I wouldn't own, that I'm not proud of? In other words, not many people would go to the ballot and say, oh yeah, I voted for the right guy. Did you see his chin? Right? So that's an opportunity where you can look at your preferences and you can say, okay, so bid is driving me to do this, but maybe it doesn't match up with my preferences. Maybe I'm actually interested in something else. So a great example of that is the moral dilemma with the train. We have this inaction bias. I'll tell you the train dilemma. There's a track. You're standing on a bridge over the track. The train is coming. There are 5 people strapped to the track. You're with just a really obese guy, like somebody from Cleveland or something. And you can push him over the bridge, and you'll stop the train, guaranteed. And those 5 people will be saved. We tend to not want to push the guy over the tracks. It's called the inaction bias, because bid doesn't want you to do harm. But bid isn't smart enough to consider the long-term consequences, right? We evolved these tricks, like don't kill a guy, don't push a guy over a bridge. But then you look at Sid and you think, okay, wait a minute, I'd actually be happier if those 5 people lived than Santa Claus or whatever. And so that's not like a fat joke. I didn't have that in naming. So that's the role of Sid, role of bid, and ego is to be the arbiter between the two, and ego needs to be more engaged, etc. So I hope that made sense. I hope I described it as well as I did the second time I spoke to Marcus, not the first. Thank you. Yeah, are there any questions?
Repeat the question.
So the question is, how do we know what our preferences are? I have no clue. I haven't even figured out whether, and a lot of this will depend on research, not just thinking, because really that's maybe just bid barking at me. But I don't even know whether any two preferences can share the exact same rank. But figuring out what your preferences are, I suppose, while truth cannot be accessed within, what you prefer, I think, can. So you can get to know yourself by looking within, I suppose, having experiences, seeing how you respond to those. But, the reason I mentioned truth coming from within is because of the philosophy of sentimentalism, which is just that we know truth inside, and a bunch of revolutionaries in the French Revolution were guillotined because they saw different truth inside, so people assumed they were lying. Do you have a question? Oh, you need to scratch yourself. I got hopeful. Does that mean? Yeah, okay.
I would get a doctor without a food paper.
Oh, yeah, well, no, this one, okay, I do have something to share with you guys. You know how I said that my sister helped me at the shelter find a dog? This is actually her. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to blow the whole illustration, but this is actually my sister, Cairo. Yeah, was that your question? How do you get one of these? It's a whole birds and bees thing. Okay, is there anything else then? Okay, all right. Please, I'd be happy to answer any questions after. Because there are a lot more studies that I would like to share.
So, to repeat, how do you make sure that bid's not taking over? What do you do?
There's really data-driven data. That's how. So the question is, how do you make sure that bid isn't taking over? It's data. There's no absolute certainty. You can't verify that, I am making a good decision here. I know some absolute truth here. The best you can do is you can try to learn some of the tricks that bid will use, like the competent faces, and then you can also look at the evidence. And if the evidence strongly disagrees with what your intuition is suggesting, then my recommendation is that you kind of table that intuitive feeling for a little while, depending on how much evidence you have. Or you at least hold them, you weigh them, you compare them, you keep them both in mind. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Francis. And I'm sorry, Kara's best sport ever. That was pretty impressive. Before we go ahead with Ashley's talk, the food truck is here getting prepared, so I hope you guys